Alright, here's a video on how to prepare this model for 3D printing. You can see here we're starting off with a sort of base mesh that we are going to be putting these little features on to make sort of a little decorative face. And all these little holes are for pegs. And if we look at our features over here, see that these are sort of thin shells that have no depth to them. So we're going to want to add some depth, then add a peg to them, so that they fit in the holes on the 3D printed base over here. So how do we do that? Well, first let's create some pegs. I'm going to press Shift A to create a cylinder and S to scale that up. And let's rotate that around the y-axis by 90 degrees, so that's nice and horizontal. And let's click on that so that we can see our move gizmo. And let's move this into place. Now, I'm going to switch into local mode, because the nice thing about local mode is that no matter how you turn your shape in local mode, that z-axis is always going to be pointing right down the middle. If this was in global mode, then the axes stay aligned with the world system, which is usually not what you want when you're moving a single object around. Local mode makes it a little bit easier so that the X, Y, and Z stay local to the object itself. And I can press Alt-G to, I meant to press Alt-R. Alt-G clears the location, Alt-R clears the rotation. No problem, let's just get that guy back in space. Rotate that around Y by 90 degrees. And press S to scale it, then Shift Z, so that it just scales around the Z-axis. Now let's focus on this guy over here. Let's get this guy lined up with the hole. Press 7, go to overhead mode. And you see that our base mesh is not exactly lined up along the world axes. Usually it'd be a little bit easier if it was, but we'll deal with the rotation for now because this is the mesh the way it currently is. And now we want to get this cylinder inside the mesh here and lined up with that hole. So let's start by getting it sort of crudely in shape in the right place and move that up. Now you can see here this isn't exactly aligned. So I mean the tunnel here is not perfectly along the x-axis because you can see the entire thing has been rotated. So what we're going to do is we're going to click up here and click on face orientation, and what this is going to do is going to color all the faces. So all the outsides become blue and all the insides, if we look over here, become red. And this can be useful because if we come over here and go inside our shape, so move the camera so that we're inside. So we see how everything just turned red? That's because we are now inside the jug, or the little bowl here. Which is going to make it a lot easier for us to tell when this peg is going through the shaft or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure this guy is still selected. We're going to rotate and press X to make sure we're rotating around the X-axis. And we're going to continue to move this guy around until the peg is about in the right place and about the right size. So that's looking good from the top. Let's look from the side. And all right, that looks like it's fairly well lined up right now, although it's a little bit small. So let's press S to scale that up. If we go back inside, all right, now we see we have a little bit of blue poking through the top there, so we scaled that a little bit too much. So let's press S to scale that down, maybe move that down a little bit on the x-axis. And so this is a bit of a judgment call as to exactly how thick your peg needs to be. It's probably going to depend on how your 3D printing is set up. But this is just sort of how you can sort of move it around and make sure everything is in about the right place and is about the right size. See that, we might need to rotate that. So let's press R, X. So we're rotating around X. And then you can keep playing with that until your peg is about the right size. Anyway, another nice thing about being in local mode is that we can now easily adjust how long that peg is. So let's press tab to go into edit mode. Press 3 to make sure you're in face mode. And let's click on the gizmo there. Now we can sort of shorten that up to make sure it's in the right place, and same with the inside. Whoops. We want to move that along the z-axis. So that looks about right. All right, so that's the peg that we have for now. And let's move this to a different layer just to help keep things neat. So let's call that pegs. And when we create that new layer, you can see that we now have this extra section in the scene collection to just keep that thing nice and clean. So let's hide the peg for now. In fact, let's move the bowl to the its own layer. And press M for move, new collection. Let's call that base. So now we can hide and show the base just by clicking there. All right, so now let's get that feature into the correct place. Let's choose that one, and I can press Shift-D to duplicate that. This is not necessary. I'm just doing this so that we have this backup in case we mess up. We still have our original here. And this is the bit that we're going to be using to put into place. Now, you can see that the origin for the pivot point for this is way down here, which is sort of in an awkward location. So we're going to right-click and go Set Origin, Origin to Geometry, and that just snaps the pivot point right to the middle, so it's going to be a lot easier to move around. And notice we're still in local space because local just makes it so much easier to move stuff around when you're doing this sort of work. Sometimes global is more useful, sometimes local is more useful. In this case, local is a lot more useful. And we're just going to move this around until it's approximately the right location. Press 7 to get the overhead view. And we want that to go approximately over the hole where our pig is going to be. Oh, and actually we're now looking from the inside here. So you can sort of faintly see the outline of the shape there. So that could be like an easier way to sort of line it up. But this bit's kind of, and let's use the move it along the Y, so we're just sort of slightly outside. And this bit is a little bit artistic. You basically just decide what is a good looking place to snap at. So that looks good for now. It's not exactly perfectly on the surface because it's a little bit offset. The hole for it is a bit to the side of where maybe it ought to be. But we can work with this. And let's just say that this is a good place for that feature here. And let's move it to its own layer. Let's call that Features. Okay, and now we can sort of show and hide that. So let's hide the base. And now what we're going to do is add a little bit of thickness to this. So let's tab into edit mode. And we're going to press 2, so we're in edge select mode. Going to Alt click the edge there, which didn't select. Okay. Oh, I think we accidentally got this one. What you want to do is make sure you get one that's right on the edge. So that goes all the way around. So we've now selected the entire loop on the edge. And press F to put a face there, and E and extrude to give that a little bit of depth. So now that we, if we click back on the base, you can see that we now have this thing that's sitting on the surface, has a little bit of depth, and is sort of going into it. And let's tab to go back into object mode. We can maybe move that a little bit closer to shave off the gap. Maybe, the thing is, we need this to be lined up with the peg hole. Maybe we can move that a little bit to the left a little bit. At this point, you're just sort of fiddling with it so that it looks right. And making sure things stay lined up. Okay, I think that's good enough for now. This feature isn't perfectly flush with the face if you want that peg hole to stay in the center, but this is good enough. especially if you're going to be snapping this together a bit later. Anyhow, let us now what we're going to want to do is, if we go inside here, you can see we have quite a lot of that shape going into the middle of the mesh here, and we want to shave that off. So what we're going to do next, let's hide that feature for now. We're going to create sort of a patch or a band-aid that's going to go over this whole section here. So we got Shift-A, going to create a plane this time, and let's scale that up with the S key, and we're going to move that over here so that we're in front of that peg. Gonna rotate that around Y, and let's go and create it so it's sort of more or less flush with the surface. It doesn't have to be perfect for now. We're going to fix that a little bit later, maybe scale that down a little bit. That's sort of a little patch shape that is going to go on top of that peg area. Now we're going to press Tab to go into edit mode. Now we're going to add some cross sections here. So Control R to start the cross sections, mouse wheel up to add those horizontal cuts, and click twice to commit, and same thing along this axis. And it doesn't matter exactly how many sections you add, just enough to get sort of a nice sort of grid mesh area, maybe about slightly larger than the size of the peg hole itself. And so next we're going to add a shrink wrap modifier. So add modifier shrink wrap. Target is going to be the jug there, and you see sort of the image of the surface faintly on the shape there. If you want to see that a little bit more explicitly, you can click that to see what it looks like after the transform. You see this is sort of off center. Remember, our feature is going to be about here, so maybe we want to move this up and over a little bit. So we can do that by, press A to select everything. Go up and a little bit over. And remember, we're not actually transforming where it is on the mesh. We're actually transforming where it is out here in regular space before the shrink wrap is applied. By clicking there, you can sort of see what it looks like after that's all done. Okay, so that looks good. Our hole is right about in the middle. Maybe shift that up a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Let's go back into object mode and apply that. So that's sort of committed the changes. And now, if you look at that, we sort of have the outside is nice and smooth and hits the edge of the shape, and the inside, well, we need to give this some depth so that we can use it as a cutting tool. So let's hide the base, go back into edit mode, press A to make sure everything's selected, and E to extrude. And it doesn't matter how thick you make this, or the thicker the better. It just needs to be thicker than the feature. Where is that? And yeah, so as long as this is thicker than the feature is, then that should be fine. Now, let's hide the feature again. Now, you might notice that this is completely red, which means that the normals are pointing the wrong way, which is going to be a problem. So what you're going to do is press A to select everything, and Shift N to flip the normals. So you see it's now blue, which means it's now okay to use this as a cutting surface. Let's turn the feature back on and get out of edit mode. So now we're going to use a Boolean modifier to create a difference here. So let's select U, add a modifier Boolean, and our second object is going to be that cutting surface here. And if we go inside shape here, you can see that it has in fact been cut away. And if we just turn that off temporarily, you see that is, let's come over to this side. See, that's what it looks like without the modifier applied. Click that on, and that is what it looks like after you apply it. So you can see it is forming, it is going completely along that nice smooth patch that we added to the surface. So we're going to click apply to commit that, and now we can delete the cutting area. And you can see the inside of this is nice and smooth and follows the surface exactly as we wanted it to. Okay, now we need to attach that to the peg. So back into object mode, let's show the pegs. So now we're going to want to do something similar again. Let's make sure that this peg, except we're going to use a union this time instead of a difference with the Boolean modifiers. So we want to make sure that the this face here is completely inside the feature. Press tab to go into edit mode. And see, right now this sort of looks fine. Let's press 3 to make sure we're in face mode, select there. Now that looks completely inside, and you might need to edit this depending on where your peg is. Like if it was back here, you'd need to move it forward just to make sure that's completely inside, but looks like we were correct to start with. Okay, let's go back into object mode, and we're going to add another Boolean. So add modifier Boolean, select this object. Instead of doing a difference this time, we're going to do a union, which is going to combine the two shapes. And let's apply that. Now you'll see that we got this weird shimmering effect where the feature was. That's because there's now two shapes there. There's the result of the Boolean, which is the whole thing, and there is the original shape that we unioned it with. If we press hide there, you can sort of see the original feature shape, which we don't need anymore. So let's delete that. Press Alt-H to unhide our peg. And there you have the feature with the peg. And if we turn on the base, fitting snugly into our 3D printed area. And we can even move that out. Just see that is going to fit in nice and smoothly and perfectly. So that is basically how you do it. Just repeat that for every single one of these. Some shortcuts you might want to take. I showed you how to do this with the Boolean modifier, which might be a few more keystrokes than you want. It's possible to install something called Bool Tool, which does the same thing, except you can do it in one click instead of having to set up a Boolean modifier. And that's easy enough to do. Just go into Edit Preferences and Add-ons and look for Bool. So this one comes with Blender. You don't have to download or install anything. Just look for Bool. That's going to pop up, and just click the checkbox to make sure it's there. And then you can do Booleans a lot more easily just by going down to Bool Tool. And the other thing you can do, when I showed you how to make the patch, you could, instead of just doing one patch for each one of these holes, you could create a single patch that covers a whole lot of holes, and then just duplicate and reuse that same patch over and over again. But that is generally how you do this. And just keep repeating that procedure for each and every one of your features, and you'll be able to create 3D printable objects or 3D printable attachments that you can easily snap in to your base here. So hope this helps.